Hi everyone, welcome back to Frugal Watchbox channel. Today, we're taking a look at the Skmei 1456 after 1 year of ownership. This is a super affordable digital watch with a zinc alloy case, which is quite rare in this price range. I picked it up for just $7, and at that price, I couldn't resist, especially since it resembles the G-Shock 5600 series, a legendary square digital watch. Of course, it's not as rugged or shock-resistant as a real G-Shock, but it certainly captures the aesthetic at a fraction of the cost. So after a year, how has it held up? Well, I've only wore it occasionally, so it hasn't been through heavy daily use. Because of that, the wear and tear has been minimal, with only a few minor scratches on the case. The digital display is still clear and functional, the buttons work fine, and most importantly, the watch is still ticking. The zinc alloy case was one of the main reasons I bought this watch, and while it may not be as tough as resin or stainless steel, it still gives the watch a solid, metallic feel that stands out among other budget-friendly options. Overall, after a year of ownership, I'd say this watch has exceeded expectations for something that cost just $7. Now let's talk about the size of this bad boy because, well, size matters, especially when it comes to watches. Case size, 44 millimeters. Not too big, not too small, just right for that bold digital watch look. Lug to lug, approximately 48.4 millimeters, which means it should fit comfortably on most wrists without overhanging like a dinner plate. Thickness, 11.1 millimeters, surprisingly slim for a watch with this chunky, industrial look. Lug width, I can't measure it because the bracelet is screwed into the lugs. If you were thinking about swapping in a different strap, well, tough luck. You're stuck with Skmei's own bracelet for replacements. Now let's talk about the weight because, oh boy, this thing is hefty. Weight, 157 grams. That's right, 157 grams of wrist presence. If you're used to featherweight digital watches, this one's gonna feel like a wrist workout. Forget dumbbells, just strap this thing on and do some wrist curls. As for the bracelet, width, 25.2 millimeters at the lugs, tapering down to 22 millimeters at the clasp. That taper adds a bit of comfort, so it doesn't feel like you've got a metal cuff clamped to your wrist. So what do we have here? A watch that's big, bold, and unapologetically heavy. Kind of like a budget G-Shock that decided to hit the gym and bulk up. Alright, now let's take a closer look at the case, bezel, and dial, because that's where all the action happens. First off, the case design is clearly inspired by the Casio G-Shock DW5600. It's got that iconic square shape, but instead of a rugged resin build, Skmei went with a full metal design. And by full metal, I mean a unibody construction. The bezel and case are made from a single block of zinc alloy. That means no separate bezel piece, it's all one solid chunk. Now let's talk buttons. We've got 4 metal buttons, 2 on each side. They work fine, but here's the catch. The tiny imprints labeling them are nearly impossible to see unless you get direct light on them. So, if you ever forget which button does what, just start pressing and hope for the best. Right side buttons, start and reset. Left side buttons, light and mode. Would have been nice if Skmei made the labels easier to read? Absolutely. But hey, at this price, they probably figure we'd just memorize the layout eventually. The bezel has a slightly raised edge to protect the crystal, which is a nice touch. Speaking of the crystal, it seems to be mineral glass, not plastic. That's a solid win at this price point. On the top of the bezel, a big, bold Skmei logo reminds you who's in charge. Down below, you'll find the water resist marking, which brings us to an important point. This watch is rated at 30 meters of water resistance. Now, in watch terms, that doesn't mean you can actually dive 30 meters deep. It just means it can handle splashes and maybe a quick rinse. Would 50 meters have been better? Of course. But at this price point, 30 m is acceptable. Just don't go swimming with it, unless you're feeling lucky. Now, let's get into the dial design, which is quite a bit going on. Surrounding the dial is a broad metallic silver border, giving it a bit of shine. Inside that, there's a black inner dial with another thin silver lining around the display panel. On the top of the display panel, there's a countdown timer imprint, and below it, you'll see dual time and WR3 bar markings. The actual digital display is simple and easy to read. Here's how it's laid out. Top left displays the day of the week. Top right, a box section showing the month and date. Below that, small icons for 24-hour mode, alarm, and hourly chime. These light up depending on your settings. Main section, big, bold digits for hours, minutes, and seconds. Easy to read at a glance. And that's about it. No fancy gimmicks, just a straightforward digital display that gets the job done. Now let's talk about the bracelet, because this thing is heavy and chunky, like it just got back from the gym. Seriously, it's got some real weight to it, which makes it feel more premium than you'd expect from a $7 watch. The weight also makes it seem like it has solid links. But is this real stainless steel? Well, only time will tell. For now, we'll give Skmei the benefit of the doubt. Here's the sad news. The bracelet is attached to the case with screws. No spring bars, no quick release, just solid screws locking it in. That means if you ever want to swap it out for a different strap, you can't. Skmei basically said, "You're sticking with our bracelet, and that's final." That said, for what it is, the bracelet feels solid, and here's something you don't always see on budget watches. Quick release buttons on the clasp. That means taking the watch on and off is super easy. No need to struggle with a stubborn clasp or break a nail trying to pry it open. Just press the buttons and it pops right off. Skmei even stamped their logo on the clasp. Flip it over, and you'll find a stainless steel imprint on the underside, reassuring you that at least some part of this bracelet is actually stainless steel. Overall, chunky, solid, and surprisingly well built, as long as you don't mind being stuck with it forever. Now let's talk about the viewing angles, because if you've been watching the video and thinking, why do I see ghostly digits floating around? You're not alone. On camera, there's a bit of a ghosting effect. But don't worry, in real life, the screen looks clear and there are no weird background digits popping up. This is just a side effect of the lighting used for filming. Cameras can sometimes pick up reflections or contrast shifts that our eyes don't normally notice. As for viewing angles, moving the watch left to right, the display remains readable, which is impressive for a budget digital watch. Sure, it's not an OLED smartphone screen, but at this price point, it does the job just fine. Now, let's move on to the alarm function, because what's a digital watch without a beeping reminder you'll probably ignore? Well, sadly, the alarm on this Skmei is a bit underwhelming. It's too short and not very loud. So if you're expecting it to wake you up from a deep sleep, good luck with that. Unless you're a light sleeper or have superhero-level hearing, you might not even notice it going off. That said, it's still acceptable at this price point. I mean, for $7, expecting a Casio-level beeper might be a little ambitious. If you just need a subtle reminder while you're awake, it gets the job done. But if you need a reliable alarm for waking up, you're better off sticking with your phone or getting a louder watch. Now let's talk about the electroluminescent backlight, because Skmei really didn't hold back on this one. The orange glow is super clear, almost overkill. I mean, if you ever get lost in a cave, just press the light button and you might as well be carrying a mini flashlight. It's that bright. But here's the catch. It does have a bit of a smearing effect on the screen, as you can probably see in the video. It's like the digits are glowing a little too much, making them look slightly fuzzy. But honestly, for a $7 watch, no complaints. You can see the time perfectly in total darkness. And let's be real, at this price, having a backlight this good is a win. Heck, in an emergency, you could probably even use it to find your keys in the dark. So super bright, a little messy, but totally useful. I'll take it. Now let's see how this 44mm beast sits on a wrist. On my tiny 6.5-inch wrist, it definitely has some presence, but not overly so. It's bold, but it's not out here trying to take over my entire arm. However, there's one little issue, And if you got a smaller wrist, you might notice it too. The links right before the lugs are unmovable, unlike the rest of the bracelet, which is nice and flexible. This creates a bit of a gap between your wrist and the first link, making the fit less snug than it could be. Is it a deal breaker? Not really. At this price point, no complaints, just something to keep in mind if you like a perfectly contoured fit. Besides, with 157 grams of weight, you'll always know it's there whether it hugs your wrist perfectly or not. Alright, now let's talk about the features of this Skmei watch. For the price, it's packing some surprises. Water resistant, 30 meters. Don't expect to dive into the pool with it, but 30 meters is good enough for splashes and light rain. Dual time zones. Perfect for those of us who like to pretend we have an international lifestyle. You can set 2 different time zones, which is handy if you're always late for your virtual meetings in another time zone. Chronograph. Need a time how fast you can run to catch the bus? The chronograph will get that covered. It's definitely not going to win any precision awards, but it worked for your basic timing needs. Alarm. Yeah, we've already talked about the alarm, but just to reiterate, it's there, just don't rely on it to wake you up unless you're a heavy sleeper. Date and week. The date and the week display are nice little extras, keeping you on track with the days of the week and making sure you don't forget which day of the month it is, because who really knows anymore, right? Electroluminescent backlight. As we mentioned, this thing glows bright enough to signal aircraft. It's like a mini flashlight at night, which is a feature you don't usually get on budget watches. Countdown timer. Need to time your instant noodles? The countdown timer is here for all your time-sensitive ramen needs. 12-24-hour format. Whether you're an AM/PM person or military time enthusiast, this watch has got you covered. For $7, that's a pretty packed feature list. Sure, it's not going to replace a smartwatch, but it's got everything you really need for daily use, and maybe even a bit more. So who exactly is this watch for? If you're someone who's looking for an affordable, no-frills digital watch that gets the basics right, this one's for you. It's perfect for people who don't want to break the bank, but still want something that looks good, has decent features, and gets the job done. Ideal for casual wear, or even as a backup watch for when your fancy one's at the shop for repairs. It's also a solid option for kids, teens, or anyone who needs a watch without worrying about it getting damaged too easily. And if you're into G-Shock-inspired looks, but don't want to spend a fortune, this is a great alternative. It's not going to win any awards for being the most high-tech or luxurious watch. But if you're okay with a little quirkiness, this watch's bright backlight, solid build, and practical features make it a winner at its price point. So, that's it for the Skmei 1456 review. Overall, for $7, it's a pretty solid choice, with a few quirks that are easily overlooked considering the price. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and checking out my merch. It helps support the channel and keeps bringing you more affordable watch reviews. See you in the next one. Bye for now.